Hello, my name's Niranjan, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast. Learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett. Today is episode number 47, where I'll be talking to Lisa Peterson, a CFP coach, author, business growth strategist, and founder of Wealth Clinic. She helps people elevate their financial consciousness by realizing their true value and creating financial security for themselves. Lisa shows you how to identify where you're stuck and repeating negative patterns so you can break free from limitations and live into your fullest potential. Lisa has a unique ability to draw from many fields of study to create synthesis of knowledge that helps people understand scarcity and the prosperity in profound ways. She's had the great fortune of witnessing thousands of money breakthroughs and financial healings as a result of the process she's explored in her book, The Mindful Millionaire. Hello and welcome to Lisa. How are you, Lisa?
I'm very well. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm honored to be able to be on the other side of this conversation with you, because I know we've had many conversations with your craft, with your insight and wisdom that you've gained in managing money, and that conversation about what money looks like on many different facets and many different levels, right? Do you believe that that's a core element of who you are?
I think so. And I think it's because I've been fascinated by money since I was pretty young, like age 7 or 8. So that's, let's see, I'm 54, so 46 years of thinking a lot about money. I do feel like, although it's so vast, right? The world of money is just so vast, but because I've spent so much time and so much of my career and also of my education focused on money, it gives me a unique insight. And it's not like I know everything, but what I do see show up in my relationship with my clients and, on conversations like this is that not too many people have thought about the relationship with money and also the practical aspects of how it plays out, especially if you want to go from, one socioeconomic status place in the world to another. There are huge conditioned systems that have to be evaluated again and again to allow that transition to happen. And it's so interesting because an example of this would be not too long ago, I was contacted by a person who had built a startup, and this startup was worth many millions of dollars, but he had come from a situation where he was emancipated, I think, at a very young age. In the United States, that means that your parents really can't take care of you. You're on your own, maybe 16, 15, and had come from, just a lot of trauma and a lot of difficulty with money. And now here he's running this successful startup. And we started to talk about some of the programming that was going on still in the narrative of his, thought process and how that was affecting him. And I don't think people understand how significant it can be to make those transitions. There is a perception that just because you have the money, everything's going to change and you're just going to come into alignment with it. But that's not what happens. It creates conflicts that you don't know how to deal with. And it's scary for people. And it can be the other way too, where you go from great wealth, and this has happened to a lot of the people that I talk to, they are born with great wealth and then something happens, maybe their father goes bankrupt or something like that, and they lose everything. And that whole trauma associated with money creates a whole different dynamic, but it's still something that we don't want to look at. We don't want to pay attention to. And yet it's the elephant in the room in someone's life. And so I think I have a unique perspective because I have made the transition successfully. I also am very cognizant of the fact that there are still these demons inside of me that I have to really pay attention to and honor and have great compassion for, because just because you do the work doesn't mean that those things completely go away. And I think because I'm inside of it, different than maybe a therapist who studied this kind of thing their whole life, not only have I studied it by experientially working with people and their money, but I've also had my own journey, and I wanted to figure out how to look at that from a spiritual standpoint.
Yeah. It's very interesting how it creeps up on us. The relationship will present itself with, like you said, different opportunities or different obstacles, and how it shakes your world on many different levels. What was the pivotal point, or was there a pivotal point in your life where it shook your world and really challenged you in your belief about that?
One of the situations, those pivotal moments that happened for me, I talk about in my book, The Mindful Millionaire, because it was so shocking to me. And it was right after I had started my company. A few months in, I was teaching a class, and a person in the class who had done a lot of inner work sent me an article or something online. And I went to that article, and in the course of reading it, this person was talking about abundance. And I realized that even though I had, become a self-made millionaire, there was money, there was me being able to walk away from my career and start a business. Like in that moment, when I was reading it, I realized that I was still completely trapped in the scarcity mindset. And I did not know what it meant to live abundantly. I had no formal introduction to it, and it was just an idea. And so before you can achieve something or create something or feel something, you first have to realize that you don't have it now. So that acceptance of like, how could I even think that I could teach this class? Like, how can I even think that I could help people? And it just caused me to completely collapse inside. And I was in a ball crying, thinking, what if not only do I have it, like, can I actually get out of scarcity? And that was a big moment for me.
That's big. It's those big wake-up calls that really end up changing our lives. Providing that we act on them, because I'm sure there are people who've had the wake-up calls but don't want to act on it because it changes too much of what goes on in the outside world, right?
Yeah, because once I had that breakthrough, all of a sudden the world seems very different, and you can't put the cat back in the bag, as they say. Like all of a sudden you're looking around and you're realizing that your whole entire life, you've surrounded yourself with people who have that same paradigm of thinking. And now you're kind of coming out of it. You might not be fully out of it, but you're moving out, and you're like, I don't even want to hang out with people who aren't interested in moving out of it. I all of a sudden just shifted. And that is not a pleasant experience, because where I was living at the time, which was in Lake Tahoe, like I looked around and I'm like, nobody's going to understand me. And now in this new place, I need to go somewhere else. I don't even know where that is. Like, that wasn't part of what I had signed up for. I wasn't planning on moving and pulling my children, out of their community that they had grown up in. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we don't do it.
But I think it's very courageous.
Yeah, you don't feel courageous at the time. You just feel like, I'm a crazy person and I'm doing all these things to my family, and they don't even understand why we're making these changes. But you just can't, I couldn't ignore it anymore. And, it ended up, not only was it my own life, but it was also my children's life and my husband's life. And thank God they listened. And I think they're still trying to figure out like, why did we do this, 5 years ago? Why did we allow mom to take over and move us?
Right.
And I have to trust that, whether it be contracts before this life or something else is happening here that I can't totally understand and might not understand for 20 or 30 years,
Mhm.
I just have to trust that we are
Mhm.
all one and that we are all connected in this experience together.
Absolutely. And there is a greater unfolding that needs to happen, which is why it hit you and many people on such a profound level.
Mhm.
There's almost like a ripple effect that happens.
Well, I think that it's in those shocking moments that we become kind of possessed with this idea. That's how it feels like at the time. But now, 5 years later, I can clearly see that I am part of the puzzle. I am a piece of that puzzle of what's wanting to awaken. And that when I didn't step into what I'm really here in this life to do and be, then that puzzle goes missing at some
Mhm.
level. And I think that when we're drawn, when we're called, when we're like I didn't expect to start a online business and be doing, Facebook and Instagram. Like those are not things of my generation. And yet here I am. But because I was so called and so led to fill that piece in the puzzle, I think a whole bunch of other people, it ripples out and other people are like, oh my gosh, what she's doing is what I'm supposed to do. And so we keep propelling each other forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And ends up creating that community that you're craving. Just like you said, you was in your hometown, I think, Utah, I believe. And you look around and you're not aligned with the same people.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the same token, energetically, those are the people who are going to be your cheerleaders and are going to support you and be your peers or your mentors show up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's cool now that the world is such a small place. We were in Lake Tahoe area and I have great friends there. It was just, there was an energy of something different. And when you move into these more metaphysical realizations that you can't always provide scientific understanding of why you're
Mhm.
drawn to certain things or synchronicities and all of that, I realized that I needed a bigger space of openness for me to do what was calling. At the time I thought it was being called, but now I look back and I'm like, I was supposed to write this book. And in order to write this book, I needed a very accepting environment where I could go to the grocery store and just watch people muscle test in front of, fruit and weird things that would never happen in Tahoe, but will happen in Sedona. I needed that kind of acceptance that I could just let my freak flag fly, as they say, and
Mhm.
just experiment and be comfortable with talking about things that were wanting to come through me, that the logical mind would be like, I don't know what you're, I don't know, I don't get it. Like it's so easy
Yes,
to talk yourself out of this stuff.
absolutely. Especially when it's not been something that is a foundational piece of who you are, even just the basis of the relationship with money or relationship with other individuals that show up in our lives. If it's not a core piece and we don't have the tools and the skills to be able to manage it, it makes it so much more challenging.
Yeah. I mean, I had worked in financial services for over 25 years and this stuff with they just looked at me like, okay, there's Lisa doing this really weird thing. Like it wasn't taken seriously. It wasn't something that
Mm.
I was going to get a promotion in my job because of. I wasn't going to become more successful as a result of me talking about these things. And yet I wanted to bring it into everything. And I remember when I first started meditating, I was in a really big corporate job and my boss was like just maybe 2 layers from the top of, Wells Fargo Bank. I mean, just so
Right.
much responsibility. And I'm at this boardroom and I was meant to kind of run her team, this meeting, and there was like 40 or 50 people around this huge conference table. And I was like, let's take a moment to talk about gratitude. And this is in 1990, or I'm sorry, 2000, before even before 9/11 and before the stock market crash. I was like, let's take a moment to do gratitude, like call out your coworkers. And it was like crickets. And I just wanted to like go under the table and run away, because people were like, what are you doing? You're supposed to run this meeting and you're talking about gratitude and calling people out and saying good things about them. That's not, you're like not in the right room. And I just thought, please just get me out of here. Like you can't do that kind of thing. Like you don't do this here, or you're going to have people think you're crazy.
Right. Such a big turning point for you. Talk about that message getting so loud where you can't even breathe, I guess, because you just wanted to crawl under the table. Such a powerful message.
Yeah. Well, back to the courage thing. I think thankfully I was willing to even try those things and fall on my face and recover. And after a while, I was like, I don't know why I'm here anymore. And that's when I started making big changes in my career.
Then the unraveling really begins.
But it took me a long time. I mean, that was 2000. And then I went into another role, and then I went into another role. So it was like 15 years of being in that world and not being who I really was, just trying to build up courage and a sense of like, who I was, and that I could actually make a difference in other people's lives. I mean, I don't think people understand that, especially those of us who have had a lot of trauma and we didn't come into this world with a strong sense of who we are, and deep insecurity. Like, I don't know if people who don't have those issues can fully understand how hard it is for a human being to blossom into, who they really are. And I think it's one of the reasons why some people maybe hang out with me is they know what it's like to be on that other side, where it's like, I want to do something, but I can't do it. And no matter what I try, it hasn't worked. And then they come into my world and I'm so vulnerable and open and supportive of that. And I think, I respect that it can take a long time too.
Yeah. What do you feel were some of the attributes that have brought you to your purpose, be it from your experiences in the financial industry to where you are, to connecting you to your purpose?
I think one of the big things was just working with people and their money as a banker, first in mortgage and then as a financial advisor, and just noticing that people really, really struggled inside of their relationship with money. At least some people did. And then some people didn't have any struggles whatsoever. And that made me really curious, because I was like, what happened to these people? Like, why are some of us so oriented around scarcity? And then other people, I would just watch them and it was like, no big deal. Things would go wrong and they'd just slough it off. And I was like, how do they do that? What's going on? And I think, just to be clear, most of those people had not studied prosperity and abundance teachings. Like, this was how their parents had been in their, childhood, and they had been modeled, and they had just naturally come into that state of being in their life. And so once I noticed the divide, then I was like, well, could we actually help people who come, like from myself, from this place of scarcity? Can people actually change? Can they change their whole way of thinking about life as a result of this one area of focus?
Yeah. What do you believe that Lisa brought to the table when having those conversations with those individuals, and maybe unveiled about you? What did that teach you?
By the time I had those conversations with people, I had already been meditating for 10 or 11 years and teaching people meditation and working as a volunteer teacher in a spiritual center. And I think by the time I had those conversations, the level of empathy that I had developed around talking about difficult topics, whether it be someone having an alcohol addiction or a porn addiction. Like, these are the things that would come up in my spiritual classes that I would help people deal with. And because I was really comfortable by that point after all those years, when I started asking about money, it was really refreshing to people to have someone hold space and be like, I don't care what you say. I don't care what you've done in the past. I don't care all the skeletons in your closet. Like, I am not going to judge you. I'm going to hold space for what you're sharing. And I think that was what changed everything in the conversations. And in all fairness, I think that's why the book is going to continue to do well over time, is that very few people have developed that kind of openness in holding space for someone's relationship with money. And the book does that. So like, I couldn't write that book and I couldn't put it out into the world until it was created absent any judgment. And there is no judgment in that book, at least from my side. Now, it could trigger people and they go into their own stories, but it's not coming from the writer. And that's very, very unusual. And that's why it's so heart opening for people, because absent judgment, which most people don't even really know what that feels like, being in the space of someone holding you completely free of judgment is quite exceptional. And a book to do that, like, it just doesn't happen that often. And I think that's how we have to approach our relationship with money. And if we don't, there's always going to be shadows that hide out in the background and prevent us from our truth.
Absolutely. It'll be simmering in the background until it is addressed and given it some light and healed for what it needs to be healed for, because it's there for a reason. It's there with purpose.
What is healing, really, but redemption back into wholeness? That's it. So that's why healing doesn't actually complete itself until that integration has happened. Right. So if there's judgment basically says separation. It pushes things away. There isn't the integration. Yeah. So my job as a coach, whether it be with somebody's money or in their business or whatever it is to be able to show them that the only reason that they're not having the experience that they want is because of judgment in one way or another. And I can provide all the best tools and pathways of how to get somewhere. But if we're not dealing with a foundational issue behind the scenes for that person, their efforts will not be rewarded in the way that they want, whether that be financially or just the satisfaction of, completing something.
Just one mask after another then, right? What do you feel your intentions are with your craft of holding space so candidly and so generously for individuals that you've done in the past, creating all this education and awareness and insight and wisdom that you have for people? What is the next step in terms of your intentions with your craft?
Finding practices that are very approachable and easy for people to implement, so that they can have those breakthroughs more easily. So that gets me really curious. I think the problem for a lot of people, especially a certain percentage of people who come to my work, they financially struggle. And so they don't have the money and a lot of resources to be able to do this work. And so I'm constantly curious of like, is there another way we could do this that would be really effective, would be cost effective for me to provide to people and take them to the same place that someone else might have spent $10,000 working with me on? Is that possible? So I think that motivates me. to just continuously, one of my core missions is like 1 million people to shift their financial consciousness from scarcity to abundance. And in order to do that, it's going to need to be brought to a really basic, easy to implement level. And I'm constantly curious of what that might look like.
I'm curious too, to be able to break it down at such a easy, fundamental place, so it can be part of a foundation as your book evolves further and as the world evolves, because we're in such a pivotal time of pretty rude awakening on many levels, and how that can be a fundamental piece, a true foundation of who we truly are. Not that we are money, but we are abundant.
It's a big undertaking because there is a whole world that's created out of untruths, and being able to navigate all the untruths, you know, in the lives that we live, it's just not easy. We're just like, oh my gosh, you know, what about this or what about that? And I think that this is where there's a book that I've been reading called Sacred Economics, and it's kind of a philosopher, you know, take on money and the relationship, and it's like very idealistic, which is fun, of like, this is where it should go, you know, and I'm more pragmatic. I'm more like, okay, I get it. Like, I'd love for some of these things to happen, but I want to know, like, well, what happens tomorrow and the next day? Like, I'm more of the builder. And then he, you know, this guy who wrote it can kind of set the tone of where he'd love things to go. And I just think it's funny because, you know, accepting and understanding that we all have a different part of the equation, and that we don't all have to be saying the same things, but there's a really good chance that we're all heading in the same direction ultimately.
Like you said, there is only one path to a certain degree, because we all come from the same place. It's all oneness. Everything else is just separation. What's next? You have built so many tools, resources, and platforms, not only for yourself, but other people who have gone through your programs, courses, and probably the other millions of people who have read your book, and that you don't even know how it's impacted them. What is it that's going to drive you further into another place of peeling back another layer, a deeper sense of who Lisa is, and how you can be of service to go into that space and support others on that path?
I think I could answer that in two ways. Because I've put so much time and effort over this past 5 years into the business and into writing the book, there's a part of me that's very curious about focusing or finding ways to focus more time and attention on my family. And there's some things that are happening in my life right now. And part of being integrated is being able to notice and pay attention to all these parts of ourselves. Because if I'm in my zone of love, which is really what my family motivates and fills me with, then I can be more of that for others. And so, you know, in the coming year, I just told my husband, it's just like family, family, family. And he thinks I'm kind of crazy, because he's like, well, finally, you know, because I haven't been so much that takes a lot to write a book and have it professionally published and run a company at the same time. Like, I can't even believe, I don't know how I did it. It just happened. But so there's that piece. And then I think what I'm doing, which is kind of funny, is I'm trying to create more of that family environment in the work that I do and the programs that I create. And I've got a call later today with a new group of people coming into my I Prosper business and money program. And what I want them to feel, and this is what I want anyone to feel who comes into my work, whether it be the Facebook community, through the reading of the book, or the I Prosper, or the Mindful Millionaire Collective, which is something that's new for the years. I want people to come in and feel safe and seen and heard and embraced, and that I personally don't think that has to happen because we're biologically, or we have a marriage certificate. Like, I think that can happen in these communities that we're building. And I feel very well equipped to hold a certain standard of what those relationships look like so that we can be seeing ourselves in this optimal way. And it's kind of like the same thing. It's just this family. Like, what does that mean to be part of the family of the world? And can we use money as the great uniter rather than the great divider, which is what it has been doing in the past, whether you look at it from race or socioeconomic status, or like money's just been a massive divider. And I call BS on that, because I think that money can be a great unifier.
Right. What is the belief system? What is the foundation that it's all being built on? That's going to give you a tint of green, or it's going to give you a tint of purple. It all comes from somewhere. I'm a true believer of that. So what is it that brings you to the space? You create this space for all these people. How were you able to capture that for yourself and nurture yourself through that process, so you can create space for others and allow them on that journey?
I won't say that I've got it all figured out. I will say that I really do trust that the intention is there fueling me forward, and then also learning about boundaries continuously, which is one of, I think, my life lessons, and making sure that the boundaries are strong. I have really strong boundaries around money, but when we get into this metaphysical stuff, it's like, it's just cosmic soup. And so I have to really pay attention to, how do I take care of myself? Thankfully, I am fueled by connection with other people, deep connection with other people. So I take really good care of myself by surrounding myself with people who are engaged in partnership relationships, not draining relationships. And I've gotten better and better of this over the years. And I'll tell you, when you're someone who's motivated by being in connection with people and those people are draining you, that is a really bad combination. And so wisdom and time has shown me that when I start to notice that a relationship isn't healthy, it is my job to not ignore it and to deal with it very, very quickly, whether it be because, somebody in the community isn't healthy for me, and it's not healthy for other people, or a friendship in my life. Like that to me is probably the most important thing, period. I take good care of my body. I have a regular daily meditation practice. There's always things that I can do better, but like coming back to Sedona, I was telling you, we just moved back from Flagstaff, and I could see that there's a more embodied experience here in Sedona for me. Like, I was like, I want to go running and I want to focus on my body more. Like, just a geographic change from one day to the next. I was like, oh, this is what you're needing, and paying attention to that and leaning into it and trusting that if we're open, those messages are kind of swirling around us all the time, but it's like, bring them in, ground them, figure out how you can use these things that are coming through and wanting attention, and then create a consistent practice with them, like daily planners and very practical tools that allow me to stay on target with what's most important. But I do feel like, maybe because I care so much, it does serve as a true protector at the end of the day. Like, it's so fascinating because I've been learned a lot in the past 6 years of running my business of like what it feels like to be a martyr, and just put yourself out there, and everyone should be like giving me more attention or whatever it is. Like, I don't run from that place. I don't operate from that place anymore. But just the realization that I was, and that I could go back, is really, really good to be like, no way. Like, I run my communities with a true understanding that when I am giving, I am also receiving. And so when I tune into what it means for me to give, I'm a part of that giving in that moment. Like I'm also receiving.
Yep.
And so sometimes I look at some of my stuff and I'm like, kind of seems a little self-centered. And it's like, but you know what, Lisa, you're showing up and you're giving everything. And this is what gets you excited. You just need to let that other thought go. And if people don't understand it or don't get it, then they can leave, because I am also giving through all of these actions. They're not just coming because it's like this selfish, one-sided place.
Yeah.
And I have to trust that.
Yeah. That's
was
bold. Yeah. And that's bold to be able to get to that space, to have that, for one, recognize the thoughts and observe them, and then to be able to decide what is the best course of action. And go back into that wonderful why that you have. I believe your mission, and a huge part of probably your soul contract of why you're here, is to empower others in this abundant space. Is to create that space and create an opportunity for them to truly connect into that oneness space.
And the realization that I can do that from a really vulnerable place, that's coming from the corporate world. You are not rewarded to be in any level of vulnerability. And so coming over here, also noticing the duality where there are people who use their vulnerability just to get more attention, right? And that's very different than using your vulnerability, because you're like, I think this is going to help people more than anything else if I'm just honest about my own struggles with this stuff. And it's funny because when I first start groups or know people come in, they're always trying to like fix me. They see vulnerability and they don't understand that vulnerability is the best teaching possible. So they think that I've got a problem and they want to help me and they want to fix me. And I know it's done from a really, like a loving place, but it's like, after a while, they're like, okay, well, Lisa's got so many problems. I don't think I can actually fix her. I mean, that would be one way that they could think of it. But it's funny because it isn't that in any way, shape, or form. It's the fact that I am comfortable with these parts of myself. And I am inviting people to become comfortable with these parts of themselves too. That's what's different about what I create than what other people create. And people are like, wait, is it because, like, what do I do with this person? How do I let someone lead me who is so vulnerable about this stuff? I'm like, guess what, guys? This is the future. 500 years from now, they will get it. But right now, I kind of might look like a little weird. I'm okay with that.
and that's the caveat right there, right? You being okay with it. Yeah, that's powerful.
And the pandemic has changed people. I think they're like, okay, I've got enough problems. Like I can't fix everybody else. So people have slowed down with, I think, trying to fix others. It's funny because there are shifts. There are like massive shifts I am watching happen right before my eyes as a result of what it means to be in a new level of suffering. Because let's be clear, samsara, I did study Buddhism for a long time. I don't consider myself a Buddhist, but I do believe that the majority of life is suffering, and that you either figure out how you're going to transform that suffering or you're going to sit in it. And so COVID is forcing people to choose which side they're going to be on. Someone who's so suffering all the time, or someone who says, absolutely not. I'm going to transform everything. And I'm going to take full responsibility for my life going forward, because the other alternative sucks.
Yeah. It's a choice that is available. It's whether you want to be able to see it through that lens. We go back to that piece of, is your glass half full or half empty, or do you want to look at it from what lens? Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but we know when we are uncomfortable, just like you've said, being in a vulnerable space, that's the only time we really grow. We don't grow in comfort zones. And
some people are here in this life to just suffer And I don't judge them. Like, I get it. There are parts of my life that I'm here to probably suffer over and over again. And I haven't chosen to look at it, in the way that maybe I could. So I do also just want to say, it's like, we just don't know what's going on. Like, every single person is on their own unique path, and it's perfect. And, some people, yeah, they probably get really triggered by, the stuff that I do, because they're like, I don't get it. And that was also part of, just acceptance of, like, it's okay that it doesn't make sense,
Yeah,
for some people.
absolutely. It's an interesting journey, either way you slice it. It's an interesting one, not only when you look inwards on how you look at life and how you present yourself through different circumstances, relationships, to how things are shown to you. Do you want life to control you, or you want to take the reins and control it? It's fascinating to me seeing people on all spectrums, and in different parts of their life. It's really interesting. So, and I'm, like I said, curious with your path and your journey with what you have done, and how you've been able to unlock, so to speak, that element of abundance, and in all areas of your life. I want to say.
Well, I'll just share something, because I've just been going through this for the past 2 months. And I don't think people, because I do dance in the circles of metaphysical stuff, and then I'm also, like I said, pragmatic. I just want to give a specific example of something that's been happening just recently. And that is, we realized that we've been building houses for 30 years, my husband and I decided, he didn't really decide, I decided it'd be a great idea to do another project, and funding it and financing it, because of a sequence of events, kind of put us in a very precarious position of taking a lot more risk on that I'm normally comfortable doing. But every step of the way, for this past 2 months, I've had to watch, my scarcity thoughts. I've had to move forward, taking risk that I wasn't comfortable with, but then trusting that it wouldn't be coming through in my life now, and feeling such a pull for many different reasons to do this new project. And it was really uncomfortable. And a lot of people wouldn't have even thought of the idea. A lot of people wouldn't have continued forward when you realized that there was going to be a couple weeks in between paying for one thing and getting some financing, and just ugly stuff that, if it fell apart, could create a whole ripple of negativity for my family, for example. I mean, this is business. And I just don't think people understand that the reason that people build wealth is because we're willing to look risk in the face, and we're willing to work our butts off to bring something into reality and create tremendous value in the world. That's the majority of people who build wealth. That's what they've done. They've taken on risk. They've faced their demons. They've walked through stuff that was really uncomfortable. And I'm right in the middle of it. And last night, it all came together. And I honestly wasn't sure it was going to happen today. Like, there was a chance that the whole thing was going to fall apart. And last night at like 5 p.m., we got an email, and it was like, oh, we did it. And we're going to be able to do this. And the risk is not there anymore. And the reward is just like, oh my gosh, like, this past 60 days has been worth it. But I want to share that with folks without getting into too much detail, that this is not just happening to me. Like, I am making very, cognizant choices of how this can happen. It's not just because I want more money. That's a nice benefit, but there were a whole bunch of other reasons behind why I wanted to make this happen, and it's going to be worth it. And it won't be easy. There's still it's another year of work to bring it into reality, but I'm like, that's the long haul. And I see how it affects the rest of our lives by making these choices, and sets us up for greater success and less stress, less worry. Like, I'm always looking for those sorts of
configurations of the decisions and choices I make. And my husband kind of gets dragged along behind because he's not a risk taker. Like, I'm not much of one, but he's even less of one. And so then I've got him to support for the 60 days. Like, you can do this. We can do this. It's going to be okay. And in the back of my head, I'm like, I don't know if it's going to be okay, but I'm going to think that it is, because something's right here. So it's super fun. It makes life like interesting and fascinating and awesome. But I just wanted to share that because people have been listening to this conversation. We haven't really talked about these practical aspects of like, what does it take to build wealth? Well, that's one example.
Absolutely. But I think the bigger piece is looking at where those scary moments are, is being courageous to have a look and have a feel of what it feels like in the body. What is it that you're repelling against? What is it you're welcoming? Are you welcoming more of the comfort elements of your life, or are you really repelling against something that pulls you out of that? So being really cognizant of what that looks like. And I think your book takes people on that journey, which I think is so magical in what you do. Through the conversations I've had with you, from the content that you create, to everything that you emanate out, is a place of safety and truly is a place of acknowledgement and courage. I guess from one leader to another, it has to show, it has to be very visible to inspire and to be there and to be led down that path. I'm really grateful that our paths have crossed, and to be able to have this wonderful conversation in all that you do and share so candidly and so openly some of the vulnerabilities that you, like you said, you share so second nature. Second nature, which is a powerful place.
Yeah, if it can inspire people to give themselves more hope and, allowing themselves to lean into the things that they really want, then it's totally worth it, to take that time and get into the nitty gritty of the stuff that probably a lot of people don't talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or even talk about inside their head. Maybe the internal dialogue isn't even there, right? Let alone the external dialogue. So hopefully that's an eye-opener for everybody listening. So Lisa, thank you so much. Such a wonderful conversation with you. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks you to everyone listening. I hope that you're taking away some things that motivate you to discover new aspects of yourself and your relationship with money.
I'm Niranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.